Time. We never seem to have enough time, especially on the IELTS listening test. Missing details about time can cause you to miss important information and maybe lose points. The test makers love to test you and trick you about time. So, in this video, I'll show you how to recognize time-related information in the IELTS listening, and show you a few examples of how they like to trick you. The first thing is to be familiar with how time is expressed. On the IELTS test, time is not always expressed in the standard format. Examiners might use a few different ways to express time. For example, the simple format might be 3:30. Pretty simple, right? Some other variations will use words referring to the minutes. So for example, you might see 3:30. You might see 3:15. You might see 3:10. All of these refer to the minutes. You might also see some formats that are not very specific. For example, someone might say just before 3, which might be 2:55, 2:58, sometime just before 3. You might also hear something very general, like sometime in the afternoon. So it's good to practice these different formats of time so you're prepared for the test. I want you to listen very carefully. I'll say a few different forms of time, and I want you to think about the answer. 1:30, 3:10, 4:45, 3:10. Next, you really want to pay attention to the keywords around time. Sometimes the IELTS examiners will put clues for time, but in longer sentences trying to trick you. So you might have an example of, the bus will leave at 4:15. That's a pretty solid, normal sentence, but that doesn't always happen. For example, the bus should arrive at 4:15, but if there's traffic, it might be around 4:30. So, what time will the bus arrive? 4:15 or 4:30? 4:30. That's a tricky one. The speaker mentions 4:15, but by saying that there's traffic, it should arrive around 4:30. Be very careful with those longer sentences. There are a few words you can use to signal time. For example, by. By 4:30. By 7 p.m. Between blank and blank. That will show you a window of time, no later than, meaning that something will happen by a certain point, not after. Around or about. It's not an exact time, but it's an approximate. And of course, before or after, meaning that an event or thing will happen before this time or after this time. So, just to remind you, always write down the first time, but listen in case there is a change. The IELTS test takers really like to trick you when it comes to time. Lastly, I wanted to remind you of some note-taking techniques you can use for time. When you're taking notes about time, use the numbers, not the words. Writing the full words of the numbers takes way too long. So, for example, instead of saying 3:45, write the numbers 3:45. It'll be a lot faster. You can also use abbreviations for certain words. For example, tomorrow is a long word, but you could write TMRW. It helps to express tomorrow. Or instead of Saturday, you could write SAT. Lastly, make sure to circle or underline time-related words in the questions. Before the audio plays, you will have 30 seconds to look over the questions. Use that time to circle or underline your time-related words. The listening section of the IELTS can be very tricky. And when it comes to time, the examiners love to trick people. But if you can recognize the different formats of time, listen for the keywords, watch out for traps, and take careful notes, it can help you to nail the IELTS listening section. Is listening for time difficult for you? What about the listening section of the IELTS test? Let me know down below. And if you thought this was helpful, like, subscribe, follow for more IELTS tips. And if you want in-depth IELTS practice, check the top link in the description.